It's time for another edition of Lewis at Large, 60 minutes of smart talk radio featuring guests from all walks of life in conversation with your host, Warner Lewis. So sit back and lend us your ears for the next hour. Now here with today's first guest is the host of Lewis at Large, Warner Lewis.
Well, welcome everybody to another edition of Lewis at Large. Yours truly, Warner Lewis from the flight deck, and of course that means some smart talk radio is in your future. In this segment, very pleased to have popular author and writer whose feature articles, essays, and reviews have appeared in local and national newspapers and magazines like the New York Times, the Oprah Magazine, Washington Post, the Atlantic, Huffington Post, etc., etc., etc. Her name is Cathy Alter. An interesting topic indeed. The work is called Crush. Writers reflect on love, longing, and the lasting power of their first celebrity crush. So we are ready for some really serious intellectual fluff here. Cathy, how are you, my friend?
Oh, boy, you make me sound so good. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Well, I know you have written about lots of different subjects. You've also been on radio and TV many, many times before. Give our Lewis at Large listeners, if you would, across Northeast Kansas, a little bit more about Cathy Alter's background, not only as a journalist, but the kind of subjects you would typically write about.
Oh, well, I write about anything that interests me and that I'm curious about. So I write a lot of profiles on people doing really cool stuff. So I just finished a piece about these guys. They are part of the High Energy Amateur Science Club, and they are all building nuclear reactors in their sheds and in their garages. And I wrote about them. I went to one of their meetings in Richmond. This guy who lives there is the head of it, and I spent the whole day in his shed, watching people sort of like light stuff up. And then through that, I met a teacher at the University of Maryland who is building a cyclotron with his students. And, of course, as an English major, I don't know anything about that. But a cyclotron is a particle accelerator, and it's just wild. So it's like being a fish out of water, and those are the stories that I like the most. And then when I'm not writing about other people, I'm writing about myself. I write memoir and personal essay, and really my past and everybody else's around me. So my friends, when we go out to dinner, my friends always say, this is off the record. Well, they're afraid they're going to wind up in a book.
Well, you co-wrote this. I want to give Dave Singleton some credit, too. He's also an author of some nonfiction work. How did you all collaborate? How do you all know one another? And how did you decide, of all the subjects to do one on, let's do one on authors' first crushes?
Well, boy, that's a big question. So I'll start backwards. Dave and I met at a super boring job that we had in Washington, a big publishing company that put out sort of legal stuff that we were not interested in reading, but we were trying to sell it. And he and I quickly found out that we were both writers and working on our own projects. So we just bonded immediately, and we became really, really close friends really fast and have continued our friendship. When I had a baby and was really bored and, housebound, he said, I'm going to come kidnap you. So my husband nicely watched the baby, and Dave and I took a long joyride all over Washington, and we ended up at a very nice restaurant for a cocktail, and I didn't want to go home, so we had another cocktail, and I didn't want to go home. So I said, let's collaborate on something, and we are both pop culture junkies. Like, I don't know who's in the president's cabinet, but I know I can identify any celebrity. I can tell you about any TV show, anything. So he's the same way, and we decided to tell each other about our celebrity crushes and started to talk about them. And then we figured that if we had good stories like we did, other writers would too. And so we put together a wish list of the writers and celebrities who write, who we wanted to approach and solicit essays from. And, they were very receptive. It was surprising. This book just sort of fell together fairly easily because I think people really related to the topic.
Well, you've got an interesting, fascinating list of people, everybody from Andrew McCarthy to Stephen King, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Some many people have heard of, some maybe not quite so much. But how did you decide? So you created the list and then contacted them, or did you? How did that come about?
We did. The first thing we did was just put together a humongous wish list from, everybody from Jon Stewart, Tina Fey, Stephen Colbert, Louis C.K. I mean, we just went crazy. Lena Dunham. I mean, just people we loved. And then we looked at the list, and we looked at who we thought we could get, or who we knew, who knew somebody. We looked at local writers who we knew. Being in Washington, there's a lot of writers here, and we're lucky enough to know a lot. So we started with them, and then we just reached out through agents, through Twitter, through Facebook. I mean, it's what's so different now, being a fan, is that you can reach out to the objects of your affection really easily. When I was writing my letters to Donny Osmond, there was a lot of time in between. There was a ton of time because he never wrote me back. But it was different the way we approached people back then, and now it's easier. So we really didn't have a hard time approaching somebody through either directly or through their people.
Well, you've got lots and lots of people that contributed to this. I'm curious, just overall, how forthcoming were the people you contacted?
Totally forthcoming. I mean, you mentioned Andrew McCarthy before, who is one of my crushes, and it was thrilling, to trade emails with him. And I had asked in one who were you going to write about, and he wrote back and he said Adrienne Barbeau, who I remember from watching The Love Boat as a little kid. And his essay is so frank and so candid and so funny, and that's what we were hoping for, and that's why we asked such good writers, because we knew that they would be completely open and honest, which is really, the best way to write a personal essay. I think as a reader, when somebody's skirting the truth or not being honest with themselves, and we didn't want that. We wanted to get right down in there, and talk about this sort of fragile time, in young Andrew's life. And I think that's what comes out in his essay, and it's so good. It's one of my favorite ones. It's got everything. It's like a master class in a good essay.
If you just joined us, yours truly, Warner Lewis, from the flight deck, of course, of Lewis at Large Radio. We're in the midst of a fun segment with Cathy Alter. She's a popular author and writer. Has written for numerous publications ranging from the New York Times, Washington Post, Oprah Magazine, et cetera, et cetera. Collaboration with Dave Singleton, a brand new work called Crush, as writers reflect on love, longing, and the lasting power of their first celebrity crush. So let's dive into this just a little bit. Let's start with Stephen King. Tell us a little bit his perspective. Who was his crush on? Tell us about that.
His crush was on Kim Novak, who, I don't know if you recall, she was in one of Hitchcock's more famous movies, but that wasn't the movie that he was talking about in his essay. And his essay is really short, so I don't want to spoil it. But he was one of our biggest names to get, because he doesn't usually contribute to anthologies. So we approached him through his agent, and his agent just forwarded our email, and he responded. He just hit reply and wrote his essay. Because he just got it and wanted to tell us about his, this experience he had in the movie theater and seeing Kim Novak, larger than life on screen, and the feelings that awakened in him. It's a perfect little essay.
What about James Franco? I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, so he came about through my literary crush, David Shields, who I had just admired and read and quoted from, and got to be friendly with him when I did a reading with him. And really, I behaved like a teeny bopper when I met him. He's just incredible. And James Franco has optioned a bunch of his books and is making movies with him. And he and I were emailing, and I was kidding around, and I said, who do you think James Franco's crush is? And he said, well, if you send me a little invitation, I'd be happy to show it to him. So I did. I wrote up a funny, very quick invitation to him, and the very next day, there was an email from James Franco in my inbox, which, of course, I thought was a virus. There was a file attached, and I was afraid to open it. I thought it would explode my computer, but instead there was a poem, and there was collages, and there was an essay about River Phoenix, who was his crush.
Well, it's been fun looking through this book. I noticed Larry Doyle, and I'll let you expound on this. His was, as he said, Laura Petrie, and we all know her as Mary Tyler Moore. I bet that would be one that might be common with many.
Well, when he said he wanted to write about her, I immediately just remembered how she looked on that Dick Van Dyke show. I mean, I grew up watching it, when it was in syndication, and I always saw her as my mother. I mean, they dressed the same, they had the same hairdo, they looked the same. So when he said that, I got it, that she was sort of the ideal mother. And for a while, he patterned sort of his romantic conquest based on Laura Petrie. And when he finally had the chance, to meet Mary Tyler Moore, the person, I don't want to spoil this because this is the best part of his essay, he was quite disappointed in what happened. But it's really funny. It's one of the funniest essays in the book. He's just a riot. Well,
I do like the way you look at her as sort of the classic mother figure. I think those of us at the time, baby boom males, looked at her as he said, a MILF, and so a mother at some level for sure.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's drift off the specific celebrities and topics here and talk just in general. What about, are there articles in here about just, if nothing else, the term bromance, so to speak, or guys who really enjoyed, just sort of didn't have a crush, so to speak, but were absolutely enamored by a male actor or a male celebrity, and the same way with females?
Yeah, the one that comes to mind is one by Sam Weissman, who's a Hollywood director. He wrote his essay on Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, which initially, when we got that essay, Dave and I were like, what? And then we read it. And it's more about the writer. It's more about Sam and who he was. It sort of captures this moment in time for him as a kid, and through his life, sort of his development as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was sort of developing and becoming this world-class athlete. It's sort of, their stories parallel each other. And it ends with him actually meeting him because he did a movie where there was a cameo by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and so he finally has this chance to sit down with him. And it's this great, original, thoughtful piece of writing about the sort of person he wanted to be. So there's these aspirational crushes that some of the men who write about men have in this book. And then there are women who write about wanting to be best friends with their crush. So Jessica Anya Blau wrote about wanting to be best friends with Tatum O'Neal after she saw her in Paper Moon, which I loved as a kid. So again, I absolutely related to that longing, to want to be friends with somebody as cool as, Tatum O'Neal. And so she wrote her essay about Tatum, and Tatum O'Neal actually read it and got in touch with Jessica, and they're meeting this week, as a matter of fact. So I feel like her fantasy will become reality, and they'll be best friends.
Well, you must have had a blast putting this thing together. I mean,
yeah,
this
fun.
had to have been labor of love for sure for you, I would think.
The exciting thing for me as a writer was getting to work with writers who I loved, and respected, and, were a little bit afraid of, but when you approach them as a writer, as a colleague, it's just amazing. It makes me feel lucky every day that I, get to work with people like this, who are just wonderful. It's kind of scary to have to edit somebody like Hannah Rosen, who to me is perfect. So, to work with her, on this equal level was a thrill, and she was so open and kind, and and willing to expand and to give me more when I wanted more about something. It was a real pleasure. And I think all writers really like editors because they make your writing better. So they were very open about it, and it was fun for me to email with Andrew McCarthy and ask him, you repeated a word twice. Can you get rid of one of them? It was kind of fun.
From what I can tell here, it looks like the people that wrote, for the most part, are Americans. Do you think that the articles, their style, their perspective, or even their crushes might be a lot different if you took this around the world?
We have some writers here like Amin Ahmad, who grew up in India, and his piece is really interesting. It's about a billboard. It's about a woman on a billboard. And Nicola Yoon, too, grew up on the islands, Trinidad and Tobago. So, these celebrities were getting there, too. It's funny. I think the most sort of foreign, even though he was born in this country, is Shulam Dean, who grew up in a very, very insular Hasidic community outside of New York City. And he was unable, forbidden really, to listen to the radio or to watch television or go into a movie theater, with mixed company. And so he was so sheltered. So sheltered that I wondered who his crush might be. I had read his memoir. He wrote an amazing memoir. And I thought, who would he have loved, and what would that have felt like for him? So I approached him and asked him to give me an essay because I really did want that diversity and that wonder, and I was convinced that someone who didn't grow up immersed in pop culture would still have the same sorts of feelings and aspirations, and the sort of common sweep that a lot of these essays have, and I was right. His essay is one of my favorites. It's so fascinating, and he was so again, his memoir had come out, and he was so busy and getting so much attention, but he loved this subject too, and he was happy to give us an essay.
Again, you laid this open and wanted them to be very candid and frank with you, which obviously they were. But as a result of that, were there any of the works that you received that truly surprised you, either on who the crush was or the nature of the story?
I think what was most surprising for me was some of the writers who wrote about crushes on either fictional characters or comic book characters, or one writer wrote about his crush on a video vixen, from Final Fantasy II. Those surprised me. But then when I read their essays, I realized that, these early crushes were just the perfect targets for our earliest notions of romantic love. They're just a dress rehearsal, whether that dress rehearsal is with Speed Racer or, and one of my favorite ones, on Tarzan, but in the book Tarzan, not on the TV show Tarzan. And really it's about, imagining this heroic self, or imagining this champion. One of them was Speed Racer, and this was written about by a surfer, a well-known surfer. So they were aspirational, ultimately. So that, it surprised me, but it didn't surprise me. One of my favorite essays was about a guy who had a pen pal relationship with Betty Davis, and that was surprising. But it's so full of longing for, himself as a kid, and not realizing who he was and who he would turn out to be, and recognizing this through his writing with Betty Davis. It's fascinating.
Again, if you just joined us, we're talking to Cathy Alter, well-known author and writer, written for numerous publications, been on the Today Show, PBS author, NPR, et cetera, talking about a brand new work she's written in collaboration with Dave Singleton called Crush, all about celebrities and writers writing about their very first celebrity crush. Cathy, just curious in general, does this book, would it naturally appeal to females or males or both? And I'm curious as to the writing that you have done in the past. Do you believe you write for women or for everyone? I know the easy answer is everyone, but do you have a perspective, do you believe?
I think it depends what I write. I think this book definitely appeals to men and women because we have great writers in it, and if you appreciate great writing and literary writing, you'll like this book. So there's no division. But I think when I write profiles, so when I write about these high energy amateur science people, when I write about I'm writing right now about this superstar real estate agent here in Georgetown and how she got to be who she is. I think that appeals, again, both to men and women. I do write for women's magazines, so, when I do something for O Magazine, most of the readers are women, so I reach out to women. And when I wrote my last memoir, where I subscribed to women's magazines for a whole year and just followed all the advice without question for an entire year in order to change my life, I figured my audience would be women, which is why, I used women's magazines. I wanted to be where women were. But I was surprised by how many men love that book. And I think it was because of my voice, as a writer, that I'm, sort of down to earth and funny and raunchy and, real. And I think that that's appealing even to a guy, that I'm not a flowery, sentimental sort of writer. But, I just try and write the best either article or book I can write, and that's sort of my goal is, that people will just like it because it's smart or it's relatable, and they have, my ultimate goal is the sort of me too, and I think that's what this book, the Crush book, does, is everybody who reads an essay will say, me too. They'll relate to that because they, too, had a celebrity crush. They, too, wrote letters endlessly to them. They, too, wanted to meet them more than anything else in the world, or wanted to be them, or wanted to be friends with them. That's the sort of relatability I always seek when I write something.
Well, this work sort of, I guess, begs for a follow-up question. Is there such a thing as a follow-up, so to speak, on this particular subject in this work?
Yes. I mean, there were so many writers that we wanted to include, and now when we do our readings or talk to our other writer friends, they want to tell their stories and they want to write for us. I think, we joked around about doing different versions, like, Crush the political version, Crush the sports hero version, and get athletes to write or get politicians to write. And it's funny, when Dave and I have appeared together, we've been asked, is there one person who we are dying to know their celebrity crush? And without even thinking, we both answered Hillary Clinton, because she never seems like she was a little girl. She just seems like she's just been born in a pantsuit. Yeah. And so I think asking her a question like that, asking her to look back on her girlhood, would be so revealing. It would tell you so much about her, and it would, to me, it would humanize her. It would give her the me too that I think some people don't see in her. That is there. It's there, but I would be dying to know who she liked.
Some coolness factor is what you're saying.
Just relatability.
Yeah.
I've heard that she loves the Beatles. So maybe that's one. But who is she? A Paul girl? Is she a John girl? Ringo. If she loved Ringo, that would say so much about her. Dave and I are both. We're so interested in the surprising sort of crushes and the people. That's why I asked Shulam Dean, because, he would give me something surprising, that would say so much about him, and the same that, Hillary Clinton would. Donald Trump even. I'd be interested to find out who Donald Trump's first celebrity crush was. Wouldn't you? I mean, wouldn't you be interested?
Oh, gosh, yes. Yes. Yeah. Several I could think of. Well,
who is yours?
What's that?
I said, who is your celebrity crush?
I'll tell you exactly who it was. Well, there's two of them, but one for sure was Shelley Fabre on Donna Reed.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow, I haven't heard that name in a long time.
Yeah, you haven't.
Exactly who you're talking about.
Anyway, I think there might have been, it was either Haley, my memories, but I remember being intrigued with Haley Mills and also with Patty Duke early. That shows my age right there.
But they were cute. I could see you liking them. I grew up watching, old movie musicals with my mom. So I have a wide range, of crushes from Gene Kelly. I just grew up and appreciating them. So when I would go to New York City with my parents, no trip was complete without a celebrity spotting.
Oh, no,
my mother and I I could recognize anybody.
Yeah, wasn't that fun to see celebrities too? It was a blast.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always a fan. So I was terrible in New York because the first thing I do is I point and I yell. I made Woody Allen roll up the car window when he was going by because I was yelling, Woody Allen. I mean, I'm a fan. I'm a total fan.
I love it. Well, we could talk with Cathy Alter for a long, long time. I have a feeling her publicist is probably saying in her ear, get rid of this guy. But
no, this is fun.
It has been fun indeed. The work is called Crush by Cathy Alter and Dave Singleton. It is available, published by William Morrow. Cathy, probably obvious, but share with us how people can get a copy of the book and find out a little bit more about the work and writings that you do.
Well, you can go to my website, which is cathyalter.com, and to buy the book, you can go on the HarperCollins page that we have for Crush, and on that page, you can be sent to barnesandnoble.com, amazon.com, Books A Million. You can go there yourselves, or hopefully your local bookstore will have a few copies for you, anywhere books are sold.
Well,
tell them I sent you.
You indeed. Hey, we told you we'd ask you a question. Probably you haven't been asked on this book tour in particular, and this is a simple one. Tell us the name of the boy you first kissed.
Oh my goodness! Real kiss, like spin the bottle kiss, or like I love you kiss.
It's all up. No, it's all up. It's up to you.
Oh my gosh! I don't. The spin the bottle was never exciting for me, but the first boy I kissed was Stephen Andrews. He's, the power of Facebook. We're Facebook friends now, but I was 16 and totally in love with him, and boy, was he cute. I still respect my first crush because he was a real cutie.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's your first kiss. Might be a little subchapter of the whole first crush concept.
There you go.
Anyway,
thanks for that idea.
Hey, Cathy, thank you so much for your time, and it's a fun work indeed, and good luck with it, and would love to have you back on again.
I would love to be on again, Warner. Thank you so much.
You bet. We'll be back with more right after this on Lewis at Large.